Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening.
Bang, man. I'm Sonny Liston. I'm Jack Dempsey. There's no one like me. I'm from Nairclaw. There's no one that can match me. You got knocked the fuck out.
You're talking to the Rolex wearing, diamond ring wearing, kiss stealing, wheeling dealing, limousine right, jet flying, son of a gun.
I'm here with the winner, Derek Lewis. Derek, why'd you take your pants off?
My balls was hot.
My style is impetuous. My defense is impregnable. And I'm just ferocious. I want your heart. I want to eat his children.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of NoBrosAllManos podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Phoebus, and we have so much to talk about. UFC 281 is in the books. This happened last weekend on Saturday night, and so much to talk about from this card. Highs, lows, retirements, potential retirements, and new champions, people bursting out, making their statement known, putting their faces out there. And we've got a couple fights that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the whole main card, but then we're also going to jump into a few of the prelim fights that I thought that were noteworthy and worth actually talking about. But let's jump right into it. In the main event, we have the middleweight championship title fight, and Isreal Adesanya loses to Alex Pereira in a fourth-round TKO. Coming in, I said Alex would have to corral Izzy behind the black line, and he kind of did that. In the first round, Izzy came out, throwing powerful leg kicks. Some of those checked. Some of them landed. Alex did the same, but I think Alex is getting the better of the leg kick exchange. And I think the hands, Izzy was winning those exchanges in the first round. Alex was landing, constant good strikes, but I think that Izzy was overall winning those exchanges. And in the last 10 seconds of that round, Izzy used a hand trap with the left, and then threw a straight right, and it connected cleanly on Alex, and then followed it up with the left hook, and Alex was wobbled at the end of the first round. This was probably the most definitive punch that Izzy landed all night, and it showed going into round two that Alex could take Izzy's power. Now, in round two, we saw the exact contrast to that, to where Alex was able to land the harder shots, and I think Izzy realized that he doesn't have the power that Alex does. But I think that we all kind of knew that Alex had the power advantage going into the fight, but it was just shown in proof in round two. Izzy kept on using the same thing. He used it constantly throughout the fight, where he would hand trap with the left, or throw a jab, or parry with the left hand, and then the straight right would follow. And he was doing that in the second round, but Alex was pressuring more, landed cleaner shots, and in the last, 10 seconds of that round, he landed this strange double leg takedown, but it secured him the round. Alex won round two, so we were 1-1 heading into round three. And going into round three, Izzy opens up with the same technique, like I said. That left hand, he was hand trapping again and throwing a straight right, landing clean, but he was able to work his way in, get the takedown from the body lock, and then he used just classic American wrestling to control Alex in round three. He was using the cross fist ride. He was riding from the back, throwing the legs in when he could. Landed good ground and pound throughout that round. And Alex really had no answer for it. He could not get up off the bottom, and it was just a clear dominant round three for Izzy. So we were 2-1 heading into round four, and this is a good round. It was a very close, competitive round. Izzy landed the more clean and effective shots, I think, in round four, and Alex was tired in round four. It was clear after all that wrestling. His pace had really slowed until, that last minute of that round, where he started to really pick up the pace, and it kind of laid the groundwork for round five. And in the corner work between round 4 and 5, Glover sit there and he tells him, hey man, look, we need a finish. We need to go out there and finish him. Do you want to be champion? And Alex did exactly that. He shot out of a cannonball into round 5, landed big shots, pressured Izzy up against the fence, and Izzy was standing square against the fence, which I think any coach would tell you is a mistake. You can only move right to left. You can't move anywhere else that you want to, and Alex is able to close the show. Landed a huge uppercut, followed it up with a barrage of hooks, and new champion. The champion has a name, and it is Alex Poatan Pereira. He won this fight clearly, and it was impressive, in my opinion. The whole fight was a high-level chess match, though. The striking at the highest level, but Alex clearly won the leg kick battle, which you saw Izzy wasn't moving as much as he normally would. Using more side-to-side, which I don't think he normally would use. He uses more directional as opposed to just, lateral movement. And so what are the takeaways from this fight? I think that Alex's win against Izzy was impressive, but I think that he showed clear deficiencies in the wrestling. And I think that there are plenty of guys in this middleweight division that are going to give him problems, i.e. Robert Whittaker. I think we give him serious problems with his timing, his ability to close the distance, work his way into the body lock. I think Marvin Vettori would be the same. I think Marvin Vettori will definitely get a takedown and ride him. I even think Derek Brunson would pose a problem. These grapplers are definitely going to show problems for Alex because he clearly does not have the skills yet on the ground to get up from bottom. He has good anti-wrestling in the sense that his takedown defense is really good, and when he's in the clinch, he doesn't allow very much more positional advancement. He prevents the takedown, locks down the clinch, and then works to break away from there. As opposed to a Robert Whittaker who's going to engage in the clinch and then get the takedown. Marvin Vettori, same thing. But, it was a great fight. It was a great fight. What do I think they should do from here? I think Alex should push for the immediate rematch. I think that they should throw this fight in Brazil. I think that they should put Charles Oliveira on that fight card at the same time and just really set it up for a huge Brazil card. And I just think that it could be, I think it could be a different fight. Let's see how Alex develops on the wrestling. Let's see if Izzy, practices more stuff in the clinch, develops more techniques to where he's able to get takedowns from the clinch. Because usually in general, I think he's the bigger guy, and he wasn't that in this fight. Alex Pereira looked like a light heavyweight, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him go up to light heavyweight later on in his career. But, this was their first fight in MMA. Izzy's now 0-3, but I think that a rematch is coming for the fourth matchup between these guys. Izzy's held the belt for so long. He's been undefeated at middleweight. I think that the rematch is the perfect thing for the UFC to do because I think Alex may be the most opponent-based champion that I've ever seen, to where if he had to go up through that gauntlet, I don't think he'd be champion right now. I don't think he could have. I would favor, honestly, Robert Whittaker against Alex Pereira. I wouldn't favor Vettori, but I think that Vettori would have a very good chance of beating Pereira. It doesn't mean that I don't think Alex is good, because I think Alex's striking is so superior to everybody else's that he will always be a problem. His power is so big. He's such a large person that he will definitely impose problems for these fighters. But these fighters that are grapplers, I think, can really take advantage of what they're presented in the fights against Alex. And it's on Alex now to go back there and to only practice wrestling. And that's a good problem to have, to where it's like, that you're only deficient in one thing, and you can really work on how to build off of that skill. Maybe it's learning even more so how to prevent takedowns, to where these guys, they shoot it on a takedown and it's just nullified completely. And now you're forced to stand against such a imposing striker like Alex Pereira. Super impressive. Very, very happy for Alex Pereira. I think he's going to be a good champion. Let's just see if he can defend it going forward and maybe even win that fourth one against Izzy. And let's jump into the co-main event now. Weili versus Carla Esparza. Coming into this fight, we thought that it would be one-way traffic, and it kind of was. Carla kind of hung around a little bit longer than I think a lot of us thought, but in the end, and knew Weili. Round one, immediately Weili showed that she was the superior striker. She had more power. She was using a greater variety of combinations, using both legs to get leg kicks and body kicks, and even the high kick everything was just so fast and crisp and clean on the striking. And then in the wrestling department, Weili even flowed better through transitions and through scrambles than Carla did. There was a time where Carla had gotten her into an almost bulldog choke position, and Weili had the skills to know to circle to the arm, to the side that her head is on, and then hip down, and then back out of the position. She was able to force the scramble more from there. And then Carla on the reshot had a single leg, and Zhang Weili knew what to do in that position, which is to sprawl and circle and then throw the leg all the way around your opponent, literally to the other side. And she was able to take advantage of that position. It was a clearly dominant round for Zhang Weili, and it kind of set up this fight is probably not going to last the second round, and that's exactly what happened. Round 2 happened. Carla shot a double after getting kind of touched up by a few of Zhang Weili's shots. Shot a double, not a great shot, great sprawl by Zhang, and instead of sprawling and then circling all the way around, she sprawled and then circled halfway, caught the arm that was holding the legs, locked it up, lifted it up, and had a crucifix essentially while Carla was on her knees. She rolled it back, secured the choke, and that's all she wrote. And new strawweight champion for the second time in Zhang Weili. Very impressive performance by her. I couldn't really see any flaws in her game in this fight. She just looks so improved in the grappling. The striking is clearly better. And I think there's only one thing left for Zhang Weili to do right now, or at least on the immediate sense, is to go out and get that trilogy fight with Rose. I think that she can win this fight with Rose this time, just like I thought she could win it the last time, but I think even more so now she'll be more of a problem just because of the improved urgentness to get up off your ground if she is get taken down, or just the wrestling in transition, the scrambles. She looked way more comfortable scrambling in positions, especially against a person that is kind of a one-trick pony in Carla Esparza with the wrestling, and she was able to dominate her in that sense. So I think that she will have a better advantage against Rose this time if they were to make that trilogy fight. And if they don't go that route, I think I'd love to see Amanda Lemos fight her. I think that this could be a great fight. I think Amanda Lemos actually has more power than Zhang Weili. Amanda Lemos uses that Muay Thai style, and this, we could be looking at another fight of the year because we know Zhang Weili is going to push forward, and we know Amanda Lemos is going to push forward. When we saw Zhang Weili fight Joanna, it ended up being a fight of the year, and it was Muay Thai Joanna versus the traditional Chinese martial arts and just overall MMA of Zhang Weili, and that ended up being fight of the year 2020. And I think that Zhang Weili is probably, if not one of the most exciting fighters in that division, just because of the way she fights. She presses forward, she tries to get the finish, and she did just that on Saturday night and was able to get the belt back. Hats off to her. Very, very impressive performance. She's top 3 pound for pound women. Just overall really impressive. And I got to think, what does Carla do from here? Carla probably needs to go back to the drawing board. She probably needs to get another fight in there. I don't really have any opponents that I think she could, take on that I would like to see her against that I could think of. But I think Zhang Weili versus Rose 3 is a great fight, or Zhang Weili versus Amanda Lemos. I think that they should do that fight in China, whoever the opponent be. I think she should have a fight card in China. She should headline it. Throw the leech on there even. The UFC really needs Zhang Weili to be the champion for a while. Not needs, I think they really want her to be, just because it'll help get their foot in the door into that Chinese market, which is predominantly dominated right now by ONE FC. And I think if the UFC wants to compete with ONE in this market, they need a long-standing champion there. And I think that Zhang Weili is that perfect fighter for that. She's all action, very respectable person, very, very good character about her, and just overall just a great fighter, just a great fighter. And now she's champion again, and I can't wait to see what she does next. Let's jump right in now into the people's main event. Dustin Poirier taking on Michael Chandler. Man, what a fight this was. We knew this was going to be a war. We knew this was going to be all action. We knew this was going to be blood and guts. And it still somehow seemed to over-deliver. Round 1, Chandler had Poirier backed up against the fence and was landing bombs. Now, how he got backed up, it came actually, I don't know if you guys saw this, the broadcast noticed, but the ref clearly didn't. It was a head clash. They clashed heads, and it caused Poirier to back up, and then Chandler had him up against the fence, throwing these big looping bombs. In post-fight press conference, hindsight 2020, Poirier even admitted, if Chandler wasn't throwing the looping at that point, if he would have thrown straight, he probably would have got me out here. But in any case, he didn't do that. Chandler was throwing these big looping punches, gets the takedown, but Dustin was able to get back up. And then in the last, 20 seconds of the round, Dustin has Chandler petting up against the fence and is landing bombs. That elbow really messed up Chandler. Chandler's face looked destroyed after round 1. And, going into round 2, Chandler uses the wrestling. He gets a great takedown, gets the ground and pound in, secures round 2. Round 2 was a great round for him. We'll talk about the little controversies after the fight, but round 3 comes out. Dustin just looked fresher, looked more urgent, looked like he was ready for this round, and Chandler just looked tired. He looked like he had, kind of blown the wad and gone for the sprint where Dustin Poirier was, in the marathon. We know that Dustin builds as the fight goes on. Not that he's a slow starter, but he just the pressure seems to only amplify. The power stays the same, but the gas tank is still just there for Dustin Poirier. And in round 3, Dustin came out, put some strikes, landed some good shots on Chandler. Chandler shoots in for the takedown, tries to go for this impressive lift, completely backfires. Dustin takes the back, able to get the choke, and that's all she wrote. And Dustin Poirier gets the submission in round 3. Now, what can we say about Michael Chandler? Michael Chandler did not fight a smart fight here. He used too much energy in certain points. He puts everything behind every shot, and I think that he would, and I think everybody has told him this, and I think he even knows this, that he doesn't have to put everything he has behind every single punch he throws. He just needs to make contact, man. He clearly has power, and I think if he just made contact instead of putting everything behind it and then set up for those lights out shots, he would be more effective, and he would win some of these fights that he's lost in the UFC. Same thing with the takedown that he went for in round 3. He didn't have to do this impressive super high lift to a dump. He could have just run the pipe and cut the corner on the high crotch, or run the pipe on the single leg, and he would have gotten the takedown, and maybe would have ended up in a more advantageous position, and probably would have won the fight because of how dominant he won round 2. But let's address these controversies that people are saying from this fight. Was there fish hooking? Was Michael Chandler blowing his nose into the mouth of Dustin Poirier? The back of the head shots. Now, the fish hooking, you couldn't really see, especially in real time. And even on replay, it still looks a little grainy. But in any case, you saw the hands around the mouth of Dustin Poirier. Did a finger go in? Did a finger not go in? We don't know for sure definitively, but something definitely happened. I wasn't too upset unless, you clearly see that they're fish hooking. Then in the blowing of the bloody nose, it's gross, but I don't think that there's any rule preventing that necessarily. But either way, both of those things are not a good look or to have attached to your name. You shouldn't be fighting like that, honestly. And, it's not that it's not that it's egregious, but it's definitely just not a good look. But where I do think that there was an issue was the strikes to the back of the head that Michael Chandler landed in round 2. Big Dan Lamurgliata was standing right on top of it, and Michael Chandler landed 5 to 7 hammer fists straight to the back of the head of Dustin Poirier. And I don't think that those caused super damage, but I think that a point should have been taken away in that situation. But I understand why, at the same time, Dan Lamurgliata didn't stop the fight and take a point away. A single point taken away in a 3-round fight is one of the most consequential things that you can have happen. You essentially almost have to go for a finish at that point. But I also understand why he didn't take it away in the sense of these guys are both so experienced. They're both so high-level fighters. I don't think he thought the intent of Michael Chandler was to purposely hit the back of the head. Now, that doesn't mean it's okay. I think that, like I said, I still think at the end of the day, a point should have been taken away from Michael Chandler in that situation. And, I think Dustin was going to win either way, but, there definitely should have been a point taken away from there. But where does Dustin Poirier go from here? Now, I think he even called for it in the post-fight press conference. I think a fight with Dariush is needed, well-deserved. But I also think Dustin Poirier should set himself up to be the backup fighter for the newly announced fight of Volkanovski versus Islam for the lightweight title in Perth. I think that he would be a perfect example for a backup fighter for that in case anybody misses weight or somebody gets sick. I think that he should perfectly align himself there, and I think that all three of those matchups are good for Dustin Poirier. Islam being the toughest one if that were to happen, but I think the UFC is definitely going to go the direction of Dustin Poirier versus Beneil Dariush, and I love that fight. Can't wait to see it. Where does Chandler go from here? He's the perfect comeback fight for Conor McGregor. All action, knows how to promote a fight, will use wrestling, but Conor has pretty good wrestling takedown defense. And this fight would just be action. I think it's a perfect fight for Michael Chandler to welcome Conor McGregor back to the ring. And if they don't go that route, I think that Michael Chandler versus Rafael Fiziev would be a great matchup as well. I think that, two good strikers, both have power. It would help also keep the division moving along further, I believe. Fiziev's really 1, maybe 2 wins away from getting a title shot, and I think that a fight against Michael Chandler would be a great opportunity for him. Whether the UFC does or not, to be determined, but I think both of these fights are great for Michael Chandler, and let's just see what the UFC does. Let's jump into the saddest fight probably on the card, the one that all really broke our hearts. Frankie Edgar takes on Chris Guitierez, and coming into this fight, I said that this was a terrible matchup for Frankie, and it was. Chris Guitierez gets the first round KO via knee, and what can we say? Chris Guitierez comes out, looks crisp as ever, sharp, great footwork, so balanced. The jab was awesome. The feints were awesome, and Chris was able to just time what Frankie is traditionally known for, pushing forward, pressing the action, wants to close the distance, and as soon as Frankie did that off the first good read, he threw the knee right up the middle, and it shut the lights out. Frankie woke up looking up to the lights, and it's just sad to see because we knew that this was his last fight. He had admitted it. It was not hidden from anybody. This was going to be his last fight, and now that he got KO'd by Chris Guitierrez, I'm really glad that it is. Frankie deserves nothing but anybody's respect, and I think it's pretty unanimous across the MMA community that Frankie Edgar is well respected. He's bound for the Hall of Fame. Those fights with Gray Maynard, winning the lightweight belt off of Pettis, being a title challenger against Jose Aldo, being a top 5 bantamweight. What did I write down? 8 fight of the night bonuses, 2-time fight of the year winner. This guy is 8 hours of octagon time too. The record for most fight time. He's destined for the Hall of Fame, and I'm glad to see him head off to the Hall of Fame and retire now. Was sad to see him go out this way. I don't think he wanted it this way, obviously. I don't think the fans wanted it this way, obviously. I don't even think Dana wanted it this way, obviously. But this is the fight business, and there was going to be no good matchup for Frankie, in my opinion, on that night. He's just had too many miles. But either way, he's sailing off to the sunset, and I could not be more happy for him. Congratulations, Frankie, on a very impressive career. MMA's Arturo Gatti. Enjoy retirement. Enjoy your family, and I think he will be successful in anything he does. Now, let's take a flip side let's look at Chris Guitierrez. Chris Guitierrez had his own demons coming to this fight. He found out pre-fight a couple days before that his own trainer has cancer. His trainer was able to still book a flight, fly out for this fight, dealing with cancer. His mom is still fighting cancer, and Chris went out there and did his job. It was a lose-lose situation for him. He could win the fight, but he wasn't going to get the cheer or congratulations that he deserves because he had who he was fighting and what he was tasked to do, to go out there and fight a guy that was a legend of the sport, so well respected, and he finished him. He did his job. And I don't think he'll get the praise that he deserves now, but down the line in a few years, I think he will get the praise that he deserves because he's such a great striker. He's a great fighter. And he's only got upward movement to go. Now, where does he go as far as opponent from here? And I was going through the rankings, and I think this is the perfect fight for him. I think Chris Guitierrez should match up versus Adrian Yanez. I think that is a perfect fight. 2 great strikers. Yanez is a great boxer. that fight has action and banger written all over it. And the bantamweight division is so deep, you can't just throw Chris Guitierrez to a top 10, but you got to give him somebody in that 15 to 11 range, and that's where Yanez is, and that's where Guitierrez debuts now in the rankings, I think at 13, and Yanez is right there at 14, so I think this is a perfect matchup ranking-wise. It keeps the division moving along, and it's a banger of a matchup. Two guys that are stylistically, it is going to be a fight. But the last note I want to talk about on this fight is, like, who would you have wanted to see, Frankie Edgar go out versus, some people said Dom Cruz, but he was coming off of that loss still with to Cheeto Vera in the head kick. But like I said earlier too, I said this already, I don't think there was anybody that fans would have appreciated him going out there against, especially if, I don't think it would have been a good performance for Frankie, regardless of who the opponent was, just because of all the miles that he's had, the damage that he's taken, the knockouts he's taken recently, man. The chin can only take so much, and he's had so many fights. But again, hats off to Frankie. Congratulations on retirement. And let's jump into the opening fight of the main card. Dan Hooker took on Claudio Puelles, and what can we say about this fight? Welcome back, Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker is coming off. He's 1-4 in his last 5, but those 4 losses were against the elite of the featherweight and lightweight division. So no fault of his own. He did his best that he could, but he's just been on tough times. It's never good to take losses that can really affect the confidence, but he came out here and he put on a clinic on Claudio Puelles. Puelles known for his leg locking and heel hook, knee bars, great grappler, and he had Dan Hooker in some serious trouble early in round 1 with that heel hook. He landed off the Imanari roll, and Hooker just stayed calm, didn't try and overcommit, didn't panic underneath the best attack of Puelles' arsenal. And once Hooker was able to escape, Puelles had nothing. He was butt scooting, throwing these spamming Imanari rolls. Nothing was even close. And as soon as Hooker forced him back up, Hooker was just touching him. Teep kick, jab, just keeping him at range. And Puelles had no answer for the striking. And it led to, Hooker landed a good teep kick. It sat Puelles down. And Peterson just stopped the fight because it was clear that Puelles did not want to fight Dan Hooker anymore. And the takeaway from this fight is, for Puelles, is he might get cut. He was not trying to fight. This was his first time on a main card on pay-per-view, and then of course it's in Madison Square Garden. Dana gave you this opportunity. This is a gift because you've never even been on a pay-per-view card before, or at least the main card, and now you're getting the biggest fight card of the year. You're the opening fight on the card. You are expected to deliver, and that's the type of fight you deliver, Puelles. Come on, man. Dana could cut him for this. Hooker did his job. He wanted to fight, but Puelles was just sitting there butt scooting. And I get that's where you're specialized in. That's what you're best at. But this is MMA. You have to be able to strike. You have to be willing to engage and get into these firefights and create risks for yourself. And he didn't do that. And Hooker dominated him. Where does Hooker go from here? We're going to talk about this guy next, but I think that a perfect match of him would be Renato Moicano, who actually just called him out on Twitter, I believe. I think that's a perfect matchup for Dan Hooker coming off of this win. But let's jump into Moicano's fight. Moicano took on Brad Riddell in the feature prelim fight. Riddell coming in 10-3, Moicano 16-5-1. The odds makers had this at a pick'em because of it. They were looking at it as, the striker in Riddell versus the grappler in Moicano, but Moicano showed that this fight should have probably been way wider on the odds because Moicano's striking on Saturday night looked phenomenal. That jab was a thing of beauty. It had no fat on it, no telegraph, and it came straight down the pipe. Moicano used range so well. He was just outside of Riddell's range, but right inside his own, in or out. The timing was perfect, catching Riddell in the half step. And Riddell has just been traditionally a great striker, but he just looked off during this fight. As soon as Moicano hit the ground with him, also then too, Moicano locks up the choke, and Riddell did no hand fighting. He didn't even fight to defend it. And when you're fighting somebody with the BJJ of Moicano, it's a wrap. the squeeze was too good. You could see that even by evidence of the cut that was opened up. It was gushing. It was forcing blood out of it. Moicano was never going to lose that choke once it was locked in, and he gets the win in round 1 via rear naked choke. And then cuts one of the best post-fight speeches of all time. I think Derek Lewis still has the best one with "My balls is hot," but this was a great post-fight speech. Cutting himself a presser, already getting the fans' love off of such an impressive performance, but then selling himself even more. He's going to be a fan favorite moving into his next fight. And I think that a matchup with Dan Hooker, who's, another great fighter, I think that they should throw that fight on the Perth card and just really build that fight, because I think Moicano isn't scared to go into somebody's backyard. He's looking just so excellent as of late with his striking. He's clearly shown improvements, and it's almost like that first time when we start to saw Charles Oliveira really come into his own. Like a spark just clicked, the light turned on, and he's really developing into that next level fighter. And it's going to be really interesting to watch him going forward. But where does Riddell go from here? Well, Riddell posted on his Instagram 2 days ago now that he's going to take some time away, and he's going to walk away from MMA for a little bit. His reasoning, because he feels like he's not fighting at the level that he is conducive of, and I would agree with that statement. I think he can definitely fight better than he is, and I applaud him for having the mental capacity to self-evaluate himself and realize that he needs to take time away from the fight game and to really get his mind right and get the spark back for the sport. But great performance by Moicano. Love to see it. Can't wait to see where he goes from here. I'd love to. Hopefully they make that fight with Dan Hooker. I think that'd just be an awesome fight. But let's jump into the next fight. That was also on the prelims. We had Ryan Spann taking on Dominick Reyes. And what can we say? This was a vicious KO by Ryan Spann at the 340 marker, round 1. Ryan Spann is clearly a very, very, very powerful man. He landed a jab, and it shut the lights out on Reyes. Now, it's either that he's powerful or the chin of Reyes is completely gone. I think it's a combination of the two. Where does Dominick Reyes go from here? I don't think he may not have ever mentally recovered from that Jon Jones fight. I thought he beat Jon Jones 3 rounds to 2. But then after that fight, he gets KO'd by Jan at UFC 253 in 2020. And then he takes some time off, comes back, headlines the UFC Fight Night versus Yuri Prochazka, and gets viciously KO'd via spinning elbow. And now he's KO'd by Ryan Spann. And the thing is about these knockouts is that they're happening quicker in the fight, which is not a good sign either. It's just crazy how quickly MMA, a career can change in MMA. He was so close to winning the title and finally beating Jon Jones. He didn't, in hindsight. The judges gave it to Jon Jones. But then just get knocked out by Jan, knocked out by Yuri, and now knocked out by knocked out by Ryan Spann, and he really might need to retire, man. I mean, I don't see an opponent that he in the top of that division that he matches up well against now, because everybody just hits so hard at that light heavyweight division. I mean, one punch, it's just like the heavyweights. I mean, one punch at that level can shut the lights off completely. And he's just been taking KO loss after KO loss. That's 3 straight KO losses, And like I said, they're happening quicker. I don't say it lightly that he might need to hang him up, but he really might need to hang him up, or because he just took a whole year off. He moved camps. He went out. He was training for this one with Glover Teixeira and Poatan. He was in a good camp, and it still didn't seem to change anything. I mean, even in the time that he was fighting in this fight, he looked stiff. He looked like he wasn't seeing, the shots that Spann was throwing. He just looked out of place in this fight, and he wasn't even really firing himself. And that's when it really starts to get, scary for a fighter, when they're not even returning fire with fire. So we'll see what he does. He says he'll be back. I'm hesitant to think that he'll ever, really be the Dominick Reyes of old. I mean, he's only 32 too, man. I mean, if you're going to get out now while you're still are young. You still have all this life to live. But if not, take some time off again. Take another year off, dude. Really, really ask yourself, is this what you want to do? And come back with the fire if it is, man. I hope if he does come back that, we see the Dominick Reyes of old. But evidence is telling me right now that it's not looking likely. And as far as Ryan Spann, where does he go from here? I could see a fight with, Jamal Hill at number 6, Nikita Krylov at number 8. I think, he's sitting at number 10 now, but I think he wants a bigger name. Let's see if he can take on those guys, in the top 10. That 6 to 10 range, I think, is right there where he should be fighting at. And I think that those are two good opponents for him. Both those guys have power as well, and what we didn't get answered in this fight with Ryan Spann was, did his grappling improve? We didn't get to see that because he was dominated on the ground by Anthony Smith in his last loss. So let's see him against a striker, or maybe against somebody that will wrestle him, so that way we can see if his wrestling and ground game has improved. But great performance by Ryan Spann. I mean, you can't take anything away from him, man. I mean, he went out there and did his job, knocked him out, and it's on to the next one, And let's jump into another fight on the prelims. Got to talk about this one. She had all the hype coming in. We had Molly McCann taking on Erin Blanchfield, and this was one-way traffic. Molly McCann had no answer for Erin Blanchfield. Erin Blanchfield, young, 23 years old, and just looking like a seasoned vet already. This was not competitive at all. Round 1 happened. Blanchfield came out, showed the superior striking. She was throwing all the weapons, leg kicks, head kicks, body kicks, using both hands, and she was able to get the takedown, from the takedown into a crucifix, put on a Kimura, and got the tap in round 1. This fight was not competitive. Erin Blanchfield looked very impressive, and I think she should easily be ranked inside the top 10. Who does she fight from here? I think that maybe, Viviane Arujau or Andrea Lee, either of those have opponents matched up. Excuse me. I think that either one of those fights, I think, would be great for Erin Blanchfield. But let's talk about Molly McCann. This is strange because the UFC has pumped a lot of money into promoting Molly McCann and really boosting her up, really giving her the exposure. She just had so much hype coming to this fight, and then they just set her up against a wolf, and she lost. She was never favored to win this fight. This is a terrible matchup for her. Just somebody with, such a versatile round of skills, and they put McCann versus Blanchfield, and she lost. And it just kind of kills that hype train that she was kind of on. So it's a weird move by the UFC. I think they kind of flubbed the matchmaking there. But, who would I want to see her against next? Maybe a Cynthia Calvillo. I think that's a great fight for her, just because we know Cynthia Calvillo will push the action. And she's not the greatest flyweight, but, she's ranked, and I think that she could pose some threats to Molly, and I think it'd be a perfect bounce-back fight to get her back on track and maybe get her, progressing up through the ranks again. And I want to see Molly succeed. She's a very exciting fighter, lovable character, so much personality. How can you not like Meatball? I mean, gracious even in the loss. She got her shoulder popped out, and what does she do? She goes and picked up Erin Blanchfield and picks her up off the ground to congratulate her in the loss. Love me some Meatball. Can't wait to see that Erin Blanchfield is. What's shocking is how the fans kind of booed her in this fight. It just shows that the fans don't know Erin Blanchfield, even though she's from New York. But I think the fans, she entered on a boo, left with a cheer. Good for Erin Blanchfield. And I can't wait to see her fight, hopefully, Andrea Lee or maybe Arujau next, or whoever the UFC matches up with, because she is going to be a problem at 23 years old, so well-rounded. The striking is great. The grappling is great. Can't wait to see her fight again. But let's jump into the last fight of the night we're going to talk about. And this was on the early prelims, but, man, they almost accidentally put on Fight of the Year. Almost. If it would have went longer, it definitely could have been. We had Michael Trizano versus Choi Seung-woo, and Trizano 10-3 coming in, Choi 10-5 coming in. Trizano misses weight for the featherweight belt by half a pound, but either way, this is two young guns just going out there and slinging leather. In the first 20 seconds, we saw a double knockdown. The bounce back up by Trizano. Choi knocks Choi down again. Choi back up. Trizano with a flying knee. Change it and charge it. Choi with a flying knee. He charged Trizano. Trizano survived. And then a cheeky left hook by Trizano sits Choi down. Trizano pounces and closes out the show for the first round KO. This was such a back and forth one round of action. You've got to go back and watch it. I mean, these guys are not the highest level. They're still young, still good prospects, but they kind of opened up the card with a bang, and it was just really fun to watch. Super fun fight. Double knockdown. You don't see that very often, but it happened. You can look it up on YouTube. As far as how many double knockdowns you find, not many, but it happened in this UFC fight. 4 knockdowns in the opening round. I mean, it was just awesome. Go back and watch this one. Give these guys some love. They're so young in the game. They need a little bit of fan support. And I highly recommend watching that fight. That's all we're going to talk about for UFC 281. Again, just amazing card, amazing night of fights. 2 new champions were crowned. Retirement sadly of Frankie Edgar. There was a few other guys on there that impressed, but overall, super great card. The UFC just seems to always deliver when they go to Madison Square Garden, and I can't wait for them to go back. 2 fight announcements that they announced that on that fight card. They announced, like I talked about earlier, Volkanovski will take on Islam Makhachev for the lightweight strap, February 11th, 2023 in Perth, Australia. That's a super fight. Can't wait to see that one. But on the same card that night, we have the interim featherweight title fight. Yair Rodriguez taking on Josh Emmett. Another banger. Both those fights happen in Perth. Can't wait to see them. Great matchups. Way to go, UFC, for making these fights happen. Putting on competitive fights, which is what the UFC does. But what I want to talk about next, we had some sad news also come in over the weekend. This one really sucks. Anthony Rumble Johnson passed away on the 13th at the age of 38 years old, I believe. Not even 40, Super sad news. Had a super rare medical condition, and he passed away. Rumble Johnson, loved by so many, man. I mean, one of the most powerful fighters, pound for pound, I think we ever saw in the UFC. Literal one-shot knockout punch power. Fighting all the way from welterweight, middleweight, light heavyweight, and heavyweight. He fought everywhere. He only got bigger, but the power was always there. Dana didn't like him because he constantly missed weight, but, regardless of that, he was a good fighter. He was, well-liked and received by everybody. And you can go up and look on Twitter and all the social media. I mean, everybody's just showing praise for the guy. Super sad to see him pass. You will be missed, Anthony Rumble Johnson. And you deserve nothing but respect for your time in the UFC. And our condolences here go out to his family. So sorry in this time of loss. But let's leave in the comments what's your favorite Anthony Johnson moment from his career. But that's going to do it on this episode, number 5. Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. See me on social medias, Instagram, Twitter, and I will catch you guys next time for episode 6 of No Bros All Manos podcast. Peace.